Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Perry.
And I'm your host, David. Tonight we're talking about Season 6, Episode 18, Inquisition. Before we continue, you can find us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast.
That is correct. And as I say every single week, you should find us and follow us because we are great, we are awesome, we're a good time, and we're not on X. Not anymore. We haven't been on X in quite some time. I have explored other platforms to put us on, but it just kind of seems like, what's the point? Nothing really had the potential anyway that X did, or Twitter or whatever you want to call it. But we're moving on from there. You can still reach us, on our various other social platforms and whatnot. So do that. And if you have any other questions, you can, of course, send them through to Facebook and we'll get to you as soon as we can. Um, but tonight we are here to talk about the episode Inquisition, as David has already stated. But before we get into that, we, of course, like to do our weekly check in. So, David, how has your week been?
Week's been fine. Work slowed down a little bit again, which is a little concerning. Hopefully, because Black Friday is around the corner, people actually will come out. I mean, one of the busiest days I ever had was like 4 years ago, Black Friday. I mean, I was more slammed. I had like 10 customers in the store all by myself on a Black Friday like 4 years ago. So I'm hoping something like that repeats itself here soon, but we'll see. Finished rereading the first book of the Silo series, which, again, the books are okay, but the show is definitely better. Have not yet seen season two's episode one yet. Came out a few days ago, but still rewatching season one. Absolutely love it. And that's basically it for me. Nothing much else to talk about. But how about you? How you doing?
Actually, this week's been pretty fun, pretty entertaining. I have been really busy trying to get everything in order here from like just kind of reorganizing and setting up in prep for the holidays. Like you said, Thanksgiving's right around the corner, so it was Christmas, so it's New Year's, and I really want to just be able to celebrate those, enjoy my new family space, basically what I've been calling it, what I've been working on, which has basically been like it's been storage space for a very long time. And so I've just been trying to clear all that stuff out. And then this weekend, we kind of just we're calling this like fat weekend, which was basically just means that I wasn't paying attention to dietary stuff. Finally, just kind of like cutting loose and just really just relaxing this week. So, we ate pizza and burgers and all the other kind of crazy stuff, which I've pretty much outlawed out of my house for these past couple of months. So trust me, I've been real fun here with my daughter when I'm telling her, no fast food, no crazy junk food or anything else. And then finally, I gave in this weekend. So we've had a great couple of days. She's been really happy, of course, because she's eating cookies and so forth and so on. Um, but yeah, like I said, we've been getting ready for the holidays, and with that, I do want to let you all know that if you're interested at all, that site that we've talked about a few times, Star Trek Wines, is having a major sale on all of their various wines and spirits. So if you're interested at all, I've posted the link to that website in our chat here, so you can see that and go there if you want. See what they have. There's a bunch of different themed ones. I'm looking at the website right now. They have a bunch of different themed ones here that are all spanning all of Trek. You can get a Ryzian wine, you can get Klingon blood wine. They've got just all kinds of stuff that just is really interesting, even if you don't necessarily drink, but you want to have something that has that kind of Star Trek feel and the look and things like that. You can do that here. If you are someone who's actually interested in trying them, tasting them, there are several different types of like the whiskeys and stuff that I think sound pretty interesting. And I've tried a couple of them, and yeah, they're not bad. So it's really up to you if that's something that you're interested in. Thought I would just throw that out there because they are having a big sale on a lot of those. So take a look, see if it's something that you're interested in. If not, hey, you might find something else there, maybe a great gift idea, anything like that. And no, we're not plugged. We're not paid to do this endorsement. I just, whenever I find Trek and Trek related things that I think are really cool that people might like to see or anything like that, I try to share those as much as possible. So again, we're here for all things Trek. I don't really care about much else. So might be some other Trek themed things, and I will of course talk about them. But yeah, go and check that site out. It's StarTrekWines.com, and you can see all of their various wares. But we're not here to talk about all of that precisely tonight, anyway. We are here to talk about Star Trek Deep Space Nine and the episode Inquisition. Um, Definitely not a fun episode, but it's a very intriguing, very complex episode. We have a lot of firsts in this episode that I would like to talk about tonight. So let's get right to it. And David, I already know the answer to the question. I did the recap last time, so it is your turn.
Okay. All right. Okay. So yeah, let's do this, guys. Inquisition is our episode here, and it is a Dr. Bashir focused episode. Um, Dr. Bashir is about to go on a little trip to give a speech on one of the nicer planets. Not Ryza, it's the other one. I forget what it's called, but
Casperia Prime.
Casperia Prime. He's about to leave to give a speech. He's done these kinds of trips before. He's about to go. He has to briefly treat Chief O'Brien for a dislocated shoulder. You know, Chief O'Brien likes to go kayaking in the Hollow Suites. And unfortunately, he's dislocated his shoulder, even though he knew that this was probably a bad idea. But in the morning, but Dr. Bashir is about to leave, he gets a message to him and the other senior officers from Cisco saying that they need to come to ops. And while they're there, they are told that Luther Sloan, who's an agent from Internal Affairs, has come suspecting that someone in the senior leadership has been passing information off to the Dominion. And so he confines all of the senior officers to quarters and tells them to wait until they have been interrogated. They're not allowed to talk to each other. It seems pretty clear that he's turned off the replicators because Bashir can't order his own food. And has told the medical conference that Dr. Bashir is not coming. When Dr. Bashir is called on to meet with Sloan, it's pretty cordial, pretty simple, doesn't seem to be all that acrimonious, simple kind of back and forth, pretty short conversation that ends pretty quickly. But O'Brien later kind of is able to, with his technical know-how, bypass the communications issue that they're not allowed to have with each other and communicate with Bashir and tell him that Sloan had asked O'Brien a number of questions about Bashir for over 2 hours. Very aggressive kind of drilling about Bashir. Bashir gets called back to Sloan, who is now much more hostile, and asks much more pointed questions about his time in the Dominion hands when he was kidnapped at a previous, he was on the way to a previous medical conference when he was kidnapped. And back in last season, he was replaced by a changeling for a time. And while he was in prison for about five weeks, Worf eventually showed up. Worf and Bashir and General Martok finally managed to escape the planet, which was very interesting. How was it they were able to communicate? Seems like the Dominion left them all the tools they needed to escape. Why would they do that? Well, there was a time when Bashir was in solitary confinement. Was it 5 days? Was it 7 days? Bashir says it was 5. Sloan says that General Martok says 7. And he insinuates that he thinks that while Bashir was in solitary confinement, he was basically, his mind was broken, and they were able to turn him into a secret spy, someone who thinks that they're still loyal to the Federation, but say there's like a secret code word, or he is secretly passing information off to the Dominion, even though he doesn't realize it. As evidence of that, they bring up the fact that recently, we know that Bashir is genetically engineered, and recently he worked with a group of genetically engineered people like himself to eventually come to the conclusion that the Dominion was going to win the war against the Federation, and they needed to actually surrender to the Dominion in order to more quickly recover from the Dominion's presence and to keep deaths low. So there's evidence that Bashir was already working against the Federation. But of course, Bashir is denying all this. He doesn't remember any secret meetings, any moments, any memories of ever giving away information or being under stress in solitary confinement. He denies all of this, but they imprison him. They take him to uh, the jail cell there on the station, and they're about to take him away from the station to a different station so they can continue to interrogate Bashir. Cisco does say that Sloan does seem to have a conflict of interest, that he has a son that died in a Federation mission, and so he accuses Sloan of being compromised. But Sloan says, "Hey, that just gives me motivation to get this right." Um, but when they are about to take Bashir off the station, he is instead beamed onto a ship with Wayoon. And Wayoon reveals that yes, this is true. He was programmed to be a Dominion agent. He just needs to have his memories. They're repressed. He just needs to work out those memories. He's done it multiple times with Bashir. Bashir always has to be convinced slowly of the memories that he has repressed, and Bashir denies them and begins to realize, wait a minute, why is both Wayoon and Sloan both trying to convince him that he's actually a secret agent for the Dominion? That must mean Sloan is working for the Dominion to set Bashir up. So uh, uh, Sloan, uh, I'm sorry, then there is the Defiant shows up and is able to
There
save.
he goes.
There you
Now
go.
he's getting
Save,
it.
yeah, save Bashir from Wayoon. Uh, however, every one of the other officers is hostile to Bashir. Cisco is hostile, even though earlier he was trying to act as like his counsel. Um, everyone, Dax is hostile. Everyone, even O'Brien is hostile. But what's interesting is O'Brien doesn't seem to have his shoulder injury from the beginning of the episode. And so that's when Sloan reveals that they are actually in a hollow suite. And this everything from the supposed beaming away to Wayoon was actually a hollow suite. They were trying to get Bashir to confess, but really what they were realizing, because they had planted a chip behind Bashir's ear, is that he actually is innocent, and this was the final test to prove it. And so Bashir, all upset and angered by this weird situation, confronts Sloan on his behavior, and Sloan reveals that he is a member of Section 31, which is a secretive intelligence agency that's been around since the founding of the Federation. Section 31 was in the original charter. Uh, Bashir is very kind of upset by the methods that Sloan has used. Sloan says, "I'm willing to bend the rules if I can get my results." And actually, I think you, Bashir, would be a great candidate to join us. You're the type who's willing to bend the rules to get the results you need. You should join us here in Section 31. But Bashir refuses. So instead, they send him back to the station. And in talking with Cisco, Kira, and Odo points out that, it turns out that other groups like the Cardassians and the Dominion, they have the Obsidian Order, or I should say the Romulans. They have the Obsidian Order. They
You
have
were
the
correct. The Cardassians have the Obsidian Order. The Romulans have the
Romulans.
Tal Shiar.
Tal Shiar, exactly. So there are actually examples of very secretive, very kind of ethically compromised intelligence groups in other alien groups, other organizations. And so it turns out that Section 31 seems to be the Federation's version of, say, the Obsidian Order. And so Cisco says, Bashir, next time Sloan comes to you and wants to recruit you, you should actually agree and join up. Don't deny them next time. so that they can learn more about Section 31. That's basically the episode. Anything I missed there, Perry?
No, that is essentially it. And like I said, there are a lot of things about this episode that we're going to get into here, so we don't really need a total, play by play. The summations of the episode are as much for, kind of reminding people what the episode is about as it is testing your knowledge to see if you actually watched it. Mr. First
Yeah.
Time Viewer, I could probably get away with it, but this is mainly for you. Um, but I can't wait for next week, which we'll talk about later because I really enjoy next week's episode. But no, that was it. That was the highlights there. So yeah, um, always, of course, like to start first question. What was your impression, Mr. First Time Viewer, as I've already specified before? And just a quick recap, even though we are into season 6 of this, if you don't know already, David has never seen Deep Space Nine before. And so that's why I always ask him that question first. So
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, this is a interesting episode. I would put it this way. There's a good part of me that was kind of frustrated with the way Sloane was handling the interrogation. Um, During part of it, Bashir eventually says, "I want to be formally charged so that I can have counsel with me," which I was glad that that scene happened because at that point things had been getting pretty rough, and I was like, why isn't he like have any sort of counsel with him, any sort of person who could help defend him against the charges? That seems to be a problem. And later, Cisco kind of steps in and says, "Hey, I'm the commander of the station. I will see my chief medical officer anytime I want to see him, and you cannot interrogate him any further unless I'm present." Um, Later, Cisco says, "I don't know, Bashir, or I mean, I don't think you're lying, but is there any truth to what Sloane's saying?" And Bashir is kind of like, you don't believe me." Um, but yeah, this is a very interesting episode because I feel like there are a lot of times when like the Federation is always presented as this utopian, idealistic place,
Mhm.
but we then see these darker underbellies of this Federation at times. These
Yeah,
these parts that don't seem to jive with that happy-go-lucky view, and kind of makes you wonder: is it Cisco and Picard who are putting that veneer on the Federation and making it look pretty and nice, but it turns out that behind behind Picard and his flagship Enterprise, turns out that there's actually kind of a more rough and tumble version of events happening behind the scenes, and we just see the pretty version. Um,
So I will tell you that the idea of a Section 31 is something that is very controversial within the Star Trek fan base because without fail, it definitely goes against the vision that Gene Roddenberry initially put forth when he created Star Trek. For him, Star Trek was supposed to always be about the fact that all of the various problems of society, of human society anyway, have been solved. And there's no war, there's no poverty, there's no disease, there's no homelessness, there's none of these things. There's no want, right? It's, for lack of a better term, it's a very socialist forward um, idea. And so the point was, he was basically saying that with humanity solving all of its major issues and no one being necessarily seen as greater than or less than anyone else or anything like that, that society has now moved into space and is all about conquering external issues because there are no more internal ones. That's why it was always important on the original series and on Next Generation that you never saw the main characters in conflict with each other, because that wasn't supposed to be something that really happened anymore. There was such a innate level of understanding between these people that you lived and worked with on these ships and space stations and so forth, that any type of conflict had to come from outside, never within. This was something that in later iterations of Trek and in later years of Next Generation, they kind of got away from, mainly because Roddenberry wasn't as hands on. Obviously, the guy was getting older and being able to, do certain things and have any kind of executive power over Trek was diminished over time. And, some people just, especially when um, shows like Deep Space Nine and Voyager came along, the recognition of there needing to be some forms of internal conflict to make the stories more personable and relatable, and easier for wider audiences to latch into. So a lot of that was changed, but there was still a lot of pushback to it. So when they finally did this section 31, which we see here for the very first time in this episode, yeah, it was such a huge slap to that mindset of what Gene Roddenberry had said all those years ago, that a lot of people didn't think that, or were actually impressed that it even got into a story, let alone continues. This is the first time that we ever hear of the official organization known as Section 31, but it pops up several more times in other Trek shows. It appears in Discovery, it appears in Enterprise, and no, it's not in Strange New Worlds yet, but I think there was some talk about it. And then, of course, we have the new movie that's going to be coming out pretty soon, which is all about Section 31. So, yeah, the thought that these utopian societies have this kind of seedy, Dark Knight type of organization that handles the dirty work that keeps everything else the pristine utopia that we see, um, was not supposed to be a part of Star Trek, but definitely became something that people started to believe in. And like we said, we've got other cultures that have their own versions of that.
Right.
The Tal Shiar, the Obsidian Order. I don't know if the Klingons have one, um, but but even with our own current society, we have like the CIA, who could
Mm,
be seen as the allegory here for Section 31. So
100%.
yeah. So now it's important to note about Section 31 that it was established in the Articles of the Federation, which established what Starfleet was supposed to be. And like I said, it's Article 14, Section 31. Now, again, with that, the articles are kind of like a glorified constitution, and as such it goes through its own retooling that kind of streamline certain things at certain times. And that's kind of what happens to Section 31. That's that part about them being able to even exist is later dropped away in other iterations, but the formation of Section 31 had already occurred, and so basically it just kind of took its nameplate off things. So they were still there. They just weren't, a recognized entity anymore.
Right.
And so that's kind of what is intimated here in this episode. Like Odo says towards the end, that with an organization like theirs that has existed since the founding of the Federation, but no longer having an official nameplate or anything like that, it'd be very hard to trace and track down. And that's something that we see is exceedingly true in all the other iterations of Trek where Section 31 is mentioned. So it'll be interesting when they do get to the movie finally and it gets out to see what Section 31 is supposedly all about and how they operate, and how they exist in the shadows of that pristine Picard Pike world of Trek.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I haven't read up on the CIA's history, so I don't know all about it. But I would I think there is a clear argument that having spies, just generally people who are willing to do some deceptive undercover work and do it in ethically ambiguous ways, is arguable. There's an argument for that.
Mhm.
Now, it's, as you pointed out, Gene Roddenberry's perspective was this kind of idealistic version. So the idea that there would be some kind of perverse underbelly to all that would, on some level, seem to betray that vision. Um, so I don't know. Do you think that it's just an evolution over time of Star Trek
Yeah,
to kind of come to that
I
storytelling?
think I think that it is something that makes sense because it's kind of Section 31 to a certain degree answers the question of how did we get to the utopian society, which is always the question that people ask when they're looking at Trek. And it's just, in the future humanity has solved all of its problems, and they never really talk about what went into that. And then we see different things when they do like their time jumping episodes, going back in time, and this person has to die or this thing has to occur or whatever to eventually bring about these referendums of change. But they still don't really get into um, the dirty work of that stuff, you know? And I feel like Section 31 kind of answers that question because it's like the Federation has put forth an idea. And even though it sounds all well and good and great, there is a recognition with, Article 14, Section 31, that this idea, however great it sounds, will come under threat. And it must be so empowered to do whatever it takes to protect itself from those threats. Now, I don't know much about the CIA, but one thing I've heard over and over again is that the CIA was charged with protecting the United States from foreign threats, nothing domestic.
That's a good point.
Yeah, the CIA cannot operate within the borders of the United States. Now, whether or not that is 100% true, I mean, I don't know if you can just Google CIA and it's going to be right there on their, website. We only, go after foreign agents or whatever. But that's one thing that I had always been made to understand that they look at foreign threats.
Right.
And so the Section 31 charter, though, would be slightly different in that its wording says it can protect the Federation from all threats
Foreign
using
and domestic.
whatever measures are necessary. So that means foreign and domestic. So
Mhm.
that charges them in a way, gives them a power that allows them to kind of not even kind of to definitely overstep boundaries and take out any element that could be a threat to the utopia society that Starfleet is and that the Federation later becomes.
Right.
Um, so I think that while initially like Bashir, I don't really like the way that kind of indicts the whole image of the Federation. But at the same time, I can't imagine there ever being a time where some kind of agency like that doesn't need to exist. And now, of course, with anything, and we've seen this before, no matter how noble and good something may start out to be, there are always the possibilities of people corrupting it, perverting it, and using it to their own ends.
Mhm.
And this is why oversight on a lot of things is so important. And so when you have an organization like Section 31 that seems to exist without any kind of oversight, without any kind of accountability whatsoever for their actions, they just kind of make their own decisions. Like Bashir says in the episode, they operate as judge, jury, and executioner on all of their um, missions, campaigns, whatever you want to call them. That right there is incredibly dangerous, and no society's utopia is worth having an agency with that kind of unilateral power. And I think that that was more the lesson I get out of watching anything about Section 31 is that we may say that groups like that are necessary, but just as essential as they are, there must also be some kind of continual oversight of them to make sure they don't overreach and cause more problems or hurt innocent people.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting idea. Interesting point you make that the CIA is not aimed toward the country, toward the USA in terms of what it's supposed to be looking into. It's actually interesting you talk about that because I did read a book recently about the FBI, and I think people who might know more about politics may have heard of the Five Eyes, which is America, the U.S. Oh, sorry, America, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, and I think France. But anyway, their intelligence agencies always work together because the idea is that while like the U.S. can't spy on our own citizens, the UK can spy on our citizens, and so we have to go to the UK and say, "Hey, what do you guys know about our people?" And how it's kind of a corrupt bargain. We get around the um, you're not allowed to, have you're not allowed to spy on your own citizens, but you just call your buddies over there and say, "Hey, tell me what you think about this guy over here." Um, and yeah, we kind of have our own Section 31 in that sense. Again, I don't think it's wrong to have intelligence agencies. I think that's kind of a necessary evil in a sense. But as this episode points out, it's easy for these groups to push boundaries and just like Sloan when he was going after Bashir, it's all super aggressive. It's also direct. It's also full of innuendo. And
Yeah.
part of me was just thinking like I feel like that would like. I mean, I've never been interrogated before. And I imagine that is part of how interrogations go. You try and trip people up. You lead them down one pathway of thought, and then suddenly take a twist. You take a hard right turn or hard left turn, and see if they trip. See how they stumble over the new line of questioning. Um, I don't know. It's maybe it's the the Federation is the idealistic organization I've always thought they were. That this seems out of place. This doesn't seem right. And of course, we're on Bashir's side. He's the character we've known and
Yeah.
loved. Um, but
And
yeah,
and it goes beyond him just being the character that we know and love. It's also he is the representation of that kind of naive utopian federation.
it's
He
true.
believes that the federation is going to help him, protect him, and that because he has been a loyal federation citizen and officer and he's got nothing to worry about, that this kind of interrogation and questioning shouldn't even be happening to him. And he operates from that righteous outrage that they, by us watching the show, they also want us to feel. So it's kind of challenging to watch an episode like this and try to put yourself in a position to identify with a character like Sloane, you know.
Right.
And they really color Sloane a bit too, with that little part in there about how Sloane had a son who died in a Dominion operation, which, did that really happen? We'll never
Yeah.
know because Sloane isn't really Sloane, at
Mm-hmm.
least not the one that we're presented with. And
Right.
of course, as we learn later on, everything, um, to a certain degree, was also a hologram. Was
Yes.
a holographic representation.
Now,
So
on that point, part of me wondered, maybe I said it wrong when I'm doing a recap. Had they captured or beamed Bashir off at the beginning of the episode or halfway through, like I said, my recap?
no, it's actually right at the beginning. So it's after
Okay.
the introduction of Sloan, when Cisco comes out there and tells everybody, "Hey, this is Deputy Director Sloan. We
Right.
have to give him our full cooperation," and he puts everybody in their quarters under lockdown.
Right.
When Bashir goes to his quarters and then tries to go to sleep,
Right.
I'm sorry, that's incorrect. Wait.
Well, he does say something about I didn't get much sleep, but he also tried to
Yes, it's
sleep.
actually right before that. So all of it was a simulation.
Okay.
No one met Sloan. No one met anybody. What happened was, if we remember correctly, Bashir was packing to
Right.
go to Casperia Prime.
Right.
He went to bed only to be woken up to be summoned to ops. And remember, he
Right.
was tired the whole time on his trip
Yes.
up to ops, everything. He
Yes.
was tired the whole time. And then Cisco tells them who Sloan is, and they go through the whole thing. At the end of the episode, it's revealed that all of this took place when Bashir was supposed to be gone. So no
Right.
one was looking for him. So that's
That's
why.
okay.
So that's
Yes.
why. Yeah. So Cisco was never the real Cisco anyway, was never there to support his rights or anything like that.
Right.
None of that occurred. When
Okay.
he went to sleep,
Right.
he only got to sleep for an hour because they beamed him out and woke him up and kept him tired and kept him hungry
Yeah, because he
throughout the
wakes
whole
up
thing.
and he's like, "What time is it?" And the computer says 7 o'clock. And he says, "Repeat the
Right.
time, 7 o'clock and 11
Because
seconds."
yeah, because to him, he thought that because to his perspective, he had just gone to bed like say 30 minutes ago, and
Right.
now he was awake again. So yeah, that whole bit after that was all fake. No one knew
Yeah.
about Sloan until after they let him go, and he was telling everybody in Cisco's office. So none of them ever met Sloan.
Yeah. Yeah. That was the one part I wasn't sure if I was hearing correctly. If it was like basically the whole episode or just
Yeah,
basically once he was in the Odo's jail cell, like from there on, basically.
Mhm.
Or to be clear, when he was beamed out to go see Wayoon, that's when I thought they were maybe starting the hollow suite, but no, it was the whole time basically.
Yeah,
Um,
whole time. It
yeah,
takes you a
which
second, but I mean, it makes perfect sense when you think about it because, again, he was tired the whole time, and his actions kind of spoke to a person who had really just laid down, and he was struggling with the change in time and
right.
trying to catch up to what was going on. But yeah, that was the moment that they took him was when he said goodbye, when he left Bashir, or not Bashir, but he left O'Brien in sick bay. That's when they took him. So yeah, the whole rest of the episode.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's fascinating because yeah, the idea that Sloane has only been seen by Bashir is it's
Mhm.
like, huh. And yeah, I guess the other part of that too is at the very end, Sloane starts acting like he wants to recruit
Yep,
Bashir.
like the whole thing had been an elaborate test, like they'd been keeping their eye on him, and while
Right.
they did wanna prove his loyalty to the Federation, there was also this, "We need someone as smart and adaptive as you to be a part of our organization."
And of course, that of course made me think of who else but um Khan, Sadiq Khan, right? Or no, what's his name? What's Khan's full name?
Khan Noonien Singh?
Khan Noonien Singh. There we go. Um, because the whole idea behind the genetically modified people is that they
Mhm.
can do all these kinds of things, and Section 31 is the very organization, if they're willing to bend the rules, that would be willing to use genetically modified individuals for special missions and probably endanger the whole genetically modified people taking over the world problem.
So so here's my theory. My theory is that when in like because they bring it up a couple of times. When Bashir worked with those other genetically engineered individuals and got them to pump out all that raw intelligence data, I think that's when he officially got on the radar of Section 31.
Hmm.
Because as Sloan pointed out, these individuals were basically alienated, just two steps up from catatonic,
Right.
non-functioning individuals, and he turned them into an intelligence powerhouse
Right.
within a few, days, weeks, or whatever, working with him. And
Yes.
so, since Bashir had learned to successfully hide his genetic enhancements and then integrate into society, he proved himself to be high functioning and loyal to the Federation. So
Right.
now that's why they were interested in him and what he could do for them.
Right.
I don't think that Khan would have been someone that the Federation, Section 31, would have been interested in because Khan, for all of his genetic enhancements and advancements, was also incredibly narcissistic and
Sure.
megalomaniac. So there's no
Well,
way he would have been able to work under someone, under another agency.
well, to be clear, what I was thinking of was just the fact that the genetically modified people exist and that Section 31 is willing to break rules. So this is where the issue of genetically modified people would come up. Um,
Well,
so
from that perspective, Khan was created at a time before the Federation came into existence.
uh,
So, considering the wars that happened after the genetically modified people kind of ran amok across the Earth, any I would feel like any return to that kind of mindset or use of genetically engineered individuals, Section 31's response would have been to try to capture them and wipe them out, not
mm,
use them because
oh, okay.
they're protecting against threats to the Federation, and considering the huge threat that genetically modified people were to them, the best thing to do would have been to wipe them out. Bashir presented them with a unique
That's
option.
what I was going to ask.
Yeah,
Okay, all
he would
right.
have been a unique option versus anybody else.
So normally you have two problems with the genetically enhanced individuals. Either they're catatonically useless or they're so narcissistically self-centered that you can't make use of
you
them.
can't use them.
And
They're more likely to try to take over things. So it's better to wipe them out if they're not functionally mute. Then
right.
it's better to just wipe them out entirely.
And so
Bashir
Bashir
presented them.
offers the one
Yes,
example of what they would actually want. Okay.
yes.
Interesting idea. I mean, I think it was kind of insinuated that if Dr. Bashir and those four other genetically modified people could become a little secret intelligence agency within the Section 31 intelligence agency, then they would be like super useful. Um,
Well, it's
but
funny you mentioned that because there are several, I guess it's considered beta canon books or whatever that go on after the end of Deep Space Nine that talk about what everybody gets up to in the intervening years. And Bashir does go on to head up a new form of Section 31. He attempts to bring them more into the light of the Federation, uh, while his attempts are laudable, it doesn't fully go that way. So he kind of becomes the face of a shades of gray version of Section 31. They don't totally exist in the black, but they do, they do have some covert op stuff. And it is implied that he does bring some of those people from the genetic engineered group that we see to come and work for him in
right,
intelligence there under his strict personal supervision. So
mhm,
he's the only one who really gets to see them and work with them and
right,
whatever else while they do stuff. And he does appear as a Section 31 captain in Star Trek Online in one of the storylines. So if you're interested
mm.
at all, go play the game. There's some stuff in there that you can see an older Bashir do stuff.
Gotcha. Well, speaking of leaders of Section 31, Sloan is played by William Sadler, which, of course, I recognized him, and it took me a minute, but he's from Shawshank Redemption,
Yeah, I was gonna say
my favorite.
he's a very memorable character actor. You probably couldn't put your name the face to the name right away, but as soon as you see him, he's that guy that you've seen in a lot of different things.
Right.
Um,
Which is
but
funny
yeah.
because in Shawshank, he plays kind of a dumb guy, kind of a rube. What's this
Mhm.
Count de Monte Cristo? And here he is. He's playing a super spy. It's got a different role. He also has kind of a smaller role in the Pacific, the Band of Brothers styled show that was about the Pacific War against the Japanese in World War II. I recently finished watching that, and he played like a general in the Marines, an important man. Chesty Puller was a very important general during the Marine Corps' move toward the Japanese islands. So yeah. Anyway, so I'd seen him recently, and that's also what triggered, like,
Mhm.
oh, what's he doing here? So, um, but I have to say, I just want to be clear. I'm a genius, and I knew that the Hollow Suite was what was going on when Wayoon was talking with Bashir. I was like,
Oh yeah.
this
To
is
me, that
too
was to me that was also the giveaway. Like you could be forgiven for not tracking right away when was beamed in or whatever that was. But
right.
as soon as Wayoon showed up and the whole beam out thing, I was like, holodeck. I
Right.
said I said the same thing. Holodeck,
Yeah.
got it, got it. They're
Yeah.
not going to.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's too many episodes I've seen where that's exactly what happens. That the holodeck turned out to have been used, and Wayoon was just too convenient. He's suddenly, oh, Bashir's been a double agent the whole time. Wow, here's the reveal,
Mhm.
and the Defiant is too easily on their heels. Too easily, brings Bashir back from the brink of, capture amongst um, the
The
Dominion.
Dominion.
So yeah, it was a fun little moment though. Fun little like, oh, what's the intrigue going on now? But I don't know. Part of me is like, ha, figured it out. So
Now, this is also a recurring theme that we've seen in Deep Space Nine at the very least, where they have someone who they're trying to convince is actually a double agent. We see that here, obviously, with Bashir. We saw this with Kira when she was stolen, also from Deep Space Nine, and they tried to convince her that she was a Cardassian sleeper agent and the daughter of was it Kenny Gamore
I
and
forget who the
his long
character, but
lost
yeah,
daughter Ilya, and so
yeah,
she needed to, remember both who she was, but also help them to rat out her father, who was the leader of this resistance underground on Cardassia, and her also struggling with them trying to convince her over and over that she's really Ileana. That was the daughter's name. That she's
Right.
really Ileana, and the kind of them torturing her a bit with the questioning and the memory enhancements and so forth and so on, that she doesn't actually have. Um, and the same is kind of true here with Bashir. They're trying to, Wayne's trying to convince him, oh, food, sensory, this, that, and whatever is going to help you to remember that you are a double agent. Here, eat
Right.
your food finally, and it'll all come back to you, and so forth. And he's kind of wise to it. He's like, no,
Right.
that's I'm not a double agent. Why are you trying to convince me, and so forth. So
Right.
again, they like to really try to hammer this home that this person really is this double agent, really trying to convince us. But
Yeah.
I wish, almost to a certain degree, I wish they'd finally just do it and be successful, you know.
Make a double
Um,
agent happen.
yeah, reveal that some character we've been watching for 5, 6 seasons really is a double agent, and they finally had their calling home mission
Moment.
and do it.
You
You
know,
know,
it is funny you mentioned that a little bit, only because we've had Dr. Bashir revealed to be the changeling last season. So we kind of had that, but we didn't know how long. Well, we figured out actually how long it had been since Bashir had been captured. How many episodes was it? Do you remember? Because
I think it
he
was
didn't have
three.
he hadn't had the
The new uniform.
correct, the uniform change was the giveaway.
Yeah,
Um, I don't know. Is there a
I
clear
think it was like 3 episodes. I think that's what we figured it out because it was like the bridging between between seasons. It was like between seasons, I think maybe 4 and 5,
something
if I
like that?
remember correctly. So it was like
Because
he missed out on the last episode of season 4, and then missed the first two of season 5, where we finally, see him in the prison complex.
right,
So yeah, I think that's what it was. So I mean, it actually matches up with what he says. He says he was in captivity for 37 days. Well, considering when this show came out, they were doing weekly episodes, and we figured out that he missed about 3 weeks, of change. That would
hmm,
amount to about the same time on the show of him being in prison. So
right. Trying to look through the episodes, but I can't find it. But doesn't matter. Um, yeah, and then the only thing I'll also say, I haven't watched the new Disney show Secret Invasion, but it's apparently based on a series of comic books, obviously, where that's actually what they did. They revealed that a number of superheroes had actually been replaced by shape shifting aliens, and that for however long, a number of characters had been, doing everything we thought they were doing as our normal heroes, but had been replaced. And some of the events that the characters had experienced were actually experienced by the doppelganger, not by the original character. Which, of course, is kind of, in some ways, almost like it's like a problem, because in the TV show, one of the characters that was replaced was Don Cheadle's character.
yeah,
What's his name? The one who plays War
Rhodey.
Machine. Excuse me, War Machine. Rhodey, War Machine. And the question was, is this alien that's replacing him? Was the alien the one that had the back broken during Civil War? Or did that happen then, or did the body switch happen after that? Because then you'd have to fake having a back injury. So like, there's a serious character moment that comes under question if they had been replaced by an alien doppelganger. I don't know if that question's been answered. I haven't looked into it because, again, I never watched that show. I'm kind of tired of the Marvel stuff by this point. I
Well,
think Endgame was like the last. Well, they had a few
oh,
good
that, yeah, yeah.
Spider-Man movies afterward, but after that, it's kind of like, all right, I'm
I,
done.
I didn't even I didn't even get to the Spider-Man movies. After Endgame, I stopped, and I keep saying I'm gonna go and at least watch the Spider-Man ones because I want to get to the one where we have all three Spider-Men together,
Yeah,
but I just still haven't done it.
yeah,
Um, but there's a tiny conspiracy, I guess it can be considered a tiny one, for Star Trek Voyager as well, because there's an episode where Voyager um, lands on what's considered a class Y or demon class planet. And while on this planet, they find this metallic looking gel goo stuff that has the ability to perfectly mimic their forms.
Hmm.
And it they find out that it's actually sentient. It just never had the ability to really coalesce into a form that could express itself. But with the crew's help, it does so, and it copies over many of the crew members, and even makes a duplicate Voyager. So then, you go along for a few episodes, right? And then all of a sudden, there's this episode where the crew is falling ill, and there's this strange illness sweeping the ship, and it's because it's all traced back to this experimental warp drive that they had helped to develop. And it turns out that the whole crew, including the ship that we've been watching, is made up of that silicate gel stuff, and that the technology they were using, while not poisonous to humans and legit humanoids, it's dangerous to them and their makeup. So now it's like a race against time. Will the engines fail before they can make it back to their planet? And it turns out that they backtrack it, and they landed on that planet 10 months ago. So conceivably, there is this huge chunk, this 10 months, nearly a year of
Of
episodes that you've been watching that were all following this fake
fake
crew.
version.
Right.
Ah,
So there's like this whole Star Trek Voyager, the Lost missions, where there's like a whole year where we don't know what the legitimate crew was up to,
ah,
potentially,
that's hilarious.
in Star Trek Voyager. Now it's something that Kobe will bring up every so often, but no one ever really kind of dives into, which I think is hilarious. And I really wish it's like that they would address like what was going on this whole time that this other group of them was out there basically living their lives and traveling as them through the Delta Quadrant for almost a year.
Right,
For almost a year.
right.
And yeah, and like it would have been cool if like they had mentioned it at some point. Like, they show up somewhere and someone's like, "Oh, we've heard of we've heard of your crew and whatever." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And they're telling them all about it and whatnot. But yeah, it never gets mentioned again. So yeah, it's just like, where in that does it fall, and what was the real crew really up to for like nearly a year?
Ah,
I guess we'll never know. So yeah, Star Trek likes playing around with doppelgangers, here and there, but they always find a unique way to do it. So it's almost like nothing is quite the same. The story isn't quite the same. But yeah,
okay,
that
yeah,
that's kind of my favorite one. That you mean to tell me that for a whole season I was watching a completely different crew?
right,
How dare you? you
yeah.
know?
And it's funny you mentioned all that because, of course, we have the changelings here on Deep Space Nine, and they haven't done that changeling, like
That's
someone
true.
being replaced in a while, like, or even just the insinuation of it.
Well, it's
Um,
also been kind of implied that Starfleet has become wise to this whole thing, so it's not as
well,
effective in Starfleet anymore.
well,
I
that's
mean,
true, but there's also I just realized that there was an episode, the Dax Worf episode, the Change of Heart one, I think it was called,
yeah.
where the Cardassian they were going to go try and save apparently had all of the secret, knew who was who, and
Mhm.
was gonna give away or have the information about which ones were where they were hidden away, but they obviously couldn't save him because Dax got injured. And
Yeah.
yeah, that would have been interesting. Any more on Deep Space Nine? Because that's where we have our episodes located. So need to maybe something will happen. I don't know. Maybe
I
you know
would
something there.
say
You're not letting me know just yet.
and I would say they probably give Deep Space Nine a wide berth for a couple of reasons.
Mm,
One of those, most chief among them, I feel, would be the fact that Odo being there, Odo can always tell when he gets in close proximity. He can always tell when that person is not really humanoid.
mm,
So running the risk of running into him
true.
or something like that is too great. And
Right.
I also feel like the female founder who kind of runs things, she's
Hmm.
probably given them marching orders not really to mess with Odo. It seems like Odo has like a special place in her heart. She kind of
Yeah.
likes to deal with him and come around him and stuff. And so it seems like she would just make it to where he's not pressed into a situation where he has to choose anything between them yet,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm. Good
And then
point.
it's just seemingly easier to stir things up with the Klingons and the Cardassians and the Romulans. You don't have to really worry about the Federation right now.
Hmm.
Um, so I think those are the reasons that I feel like they've kind of kept a wide berth on Deep Space Nine and the Federation at large. But
Right.
who knows? We still have, what, a season and a half, a season and a third left to figure out all of this and what's going on.
Yeah.
Um,
8 episodes left. This one's done. So if there are 26 episodes a season, then yeah, about a third left ish.
yeah.
So
Man, it's been a wild ride. What are your? I know we should probably save this for another episode, but I'm going to ask anyway. What is like so far been a favorite moment that stands out to you over everything
uh,
that you've watched? Is there one thing that kind of comes back as like this particular thing was awesome?
I'll just say it this way: anytime Avery Brooks as Cisco has to get passionate about anything. Like even in this episode where he has to tell Sloane, I'm the captain of this station. And I can do what I please. Am I been demoted or anything? Like, I mean, just give Avery Brooks a moral cause and let Cisco
Well,
out.
funny you should say that, and it's a great time that I asked this question because we're coming up on the end. Little bit of foreshadowing into next week's episode. It is
Mm,
a fantastic Avery Brooks episode. And of course,
fantastic.
for those of you who are in the know, I am talking about the master class that he teaches on the episode In the Pale Moonlight. It is
Mm.
one of my favorite episodes of Deep Space Nine. I can't wait for us to really get into it. So yeah, we all have that to look forward to. You would not be wrong to watch it twice. Just saying. Just saying. You would not be wrong to watch it twice. It is a great episode for both Avery Brooks and a surprise recurring guest we haven't seen in a while, Garrick. So
Ah, it's been a
so
while since we've
enjoy.
had him.
It
Yeah.
is. And as we've said many, many times before, when Avery Brooks really gets to, get into things and cut loose, he is great. This episode is kind of like the proverbial chef's kiss of that.
Mm.
He gets to absolutely cut loose. We get to see him, both as commander and then as the man weighing his options, and it's great. It's great. You're gonna love it,
Good.
and we're just gonna probably take us an hour and a half to go through why this episode is so wonderful. And again, for those of you who've already seen it, of course, you know what I'm talking about.
Well,
So
I will also say this. I was thinking today that once we finish watching all 7 seasons, we definitely need to have some sort of follow-up episode where we rewatch the pilot and comment on the show, the pilot having watched everything and see just talk about
I
7 seasons back
I
back
was
to
I
square
was
one.
going to agree. I will agree, but I was going to suggest that what we do was we go through and we pick like significant Avery Brooks episodes throughout the seasons to do a comparison to show his growth in leaps and bounds. So the pilot, of course, we have to watch because it is very much Cisco focused, and then we can watch certain other episodes like the one where Mirror Jennifer comes and the in the Far Beyond the Stars is another one, and the Pale Moonlight is another one that pops out to me. Things like that, just to watch the growth and development of the character all over again because it's gonna be fun. So, um, but yeah, I'm all for it. So we can just do a comparison as well. So
I love you just backdoored a rewatching of the entire series.
no, I just said specific episodes at different
Yeah.
points. I didn't say
I
the
have a
whole
feeling
thing.
you're gonna be like, well, we can't skip this episode. We can't skip
I
this
mean,
episode.
I know I'm not the only one who does this, but a lot of times I will put Star Trek on while I'm doing like house chores, right? Because I've seen the show so much. So
Right.
I'll just put it on and then, I'll be cooking or cleaning or moving stuff and whatever. And the nice big TV in the living room is on. And the way I've got it placed, you can see it from pretty much everywhere. So it works for me. And then inevitably, though, I'll get halfway through something, and an episode will come on that I'm really like, "Oh yeah, this has always been a favorite." So whenever, and then I'll sit down to watch it, and the next thing I know, I've watched 4 episodes instead of just the one or just a part of the one or whatever. So if that happens to you, um, there's your rewatch. There you go. So, um, but I don't know if you can do. Well, you could probably get away with it. Um, with work, you know, I'm sure you have long periods of time. Well, you read so much during your downtime at work. I'm not kidding. That is still the only true thing I miss about working mattress retail is the incredible amounts of downtime. I still remember there'd be whole days I'd get up, get dressed, ready to go and sell, and I would sit there, and from the time I keyed into the store to the time I locked that door, no one came in. So there's just ample time to watch shows or read or do whatever. Don't have
100%.
that. Don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
So,
Well, honestly, in terms of health, your current situation is probably healthier than me just
uh,
sitting on my butt reading every day.
yeah. All right. Yeah. I will say that, like,
Book
in
two
terms
of
of,
the Silo series is next for me. So
oh yeah, I remember plenty of times sitting there in the store and like, I really should like walk around in here or something
mm,
because, man, I'm just killing myself, taking years off my life sitting at this desk. And so now that's what I do. Try to do, and I'm glad I've been doing the gym stuff again this week, notwithstanding. Like I said, this has pretty much been an off week, and then of course we got Thanksgiving and everything else coming up. So yeah, lots to do.
right.
But any final thoughts on this episode? Um, any questions you may have? I didn't ask. I've never asked that before, considering that this is the first time that you've seen Section 31 and Sloan and so forth.
I don't have any questions for him. I guess. My understanding though is that Sloan will return. This is not the only time we
Yes,
see him.
this is not the only time that we see Sloan or hear about Section 31. If you are interested in the greater machinations of Section 31, you will have to watch several other treks to get all of their stuff. I think Discovery does the biggest deep dive on
Mm,
Section 31, which is also why the new movie that's coming out, Section 31, will feature elements of Discovery because that's kind of where it got its launching off point
gotcha.
there. But yeah, so there you go. Well, then, okay. I think that will do it for us on this episode. Like I said before, you can find us and follow us anywhere you happen to do your social medias, except for X, Twitter, or whatever. No, I'll answer the question now, just in case it's in your brain somewhere. I don't think that I will be establishing a blue sky for um, um, the fire caves. I don't really see the point. And for those of you who don't know, Blue Sky is kind of like the equivalent of Twitter. Apparently, Blue Sky was created by the original creators of Twitter after they got bought out from Elon Musk's takeover. They went and they established a new version, and it's called Blue Sky. So if you're interested at all in just being on a new platform, there you go. If you're kind of one of those, oh, I missed the old days of Twitter, it's got that same original format, and apparently you're supposed to be able to do more to manipulate the algorithm that shows you things. Um, on Blue Sky than you can on Twitter now. So again, it's an option that you have. I'm not promoting again any other thing or whatever. I just saw it come up recently. So there you go. I know there's a lot of platforms out there that people use. I'm just not familiar with all of them, and really, I'm too exhausted to try to find them all. So no, just know that one. Um, but that'll be it for us. Again, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can leave them on our YouTube channel. You can also leave them for us on Facebook. We'll get to them as soon as we can. But otherwise, until next week and in the pale moonlight, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.